Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast, a very special episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. If you are watching this live, you see I am rocking a Chase Elliott Napa Racing hat because it is race week in the NASCAR Cup Series, getting ready to see the Cup Series start the 2025 season with the Daytona 500 on Sunday, 67th running of the Great American Race. And with the race coming up with the start of another NASCAR Cup Series season about to get underway, I wanted to make an episode focused all about NASCAR and the ties to UGA and some of the ties to Georgia football. We will get into an interview in a little bit with former Georgia linebacker Nate McBride, who is now a jackman in the Cup Series. I had a great conversation with Nate, both about his playing career and also his career after football, how he got involved in NASCAR. I really hope this is an episode that the people listening, if you are a big NASCAR fan, I think you'll love it. Even if you're not a NASCAR fan, I think you'll enjoy getting to learn about the sport. Nate gives really good insight, especially I was really surprised as he talked in this interview. He was not someone that was a NASCAR fan. I sort of expected, his football career is ending. Hey, I have this hobby. Let me look into it. That's not how it played out at all. But I thought it was a great conversation. I hope you guys will stick around for that. Before we talk to Nate, I wanted to get into a little bit of some of the ties with UGA, some of the ties to the state of Georgia when it comes to NASCAR, when it comes to the Cup Series. And you have some natural ones over the years, as simple as drivers from the state of Georgia. Bill Elliott being the most famous one. Awesome Bill from Dawsonville. His son Chase, I'm wearing his Napa hat, also from Dawsonville. Other guys, David Reagan, Reed Sorensen. I'm sure I'm forgetting some other names along the way, but there are some direct ties to NASCAR with the University of Georgia. And I wanted to highlight some of them before we got into the conversation with Nate. And I would encourage, if you're listening to this, to go check out the YouTube. I've got some photos, some videos pulled up that we'll get into in this first part of the podcast. Really interesting. Back in 2001, Starter had a sponsorship with Elton Sawyer in the now Xfinity series, which is basically NASCAR's AAA series. And they would run different college schemes on the 98 Ford based on what track they were at. The schools that were in close proximity to that particular racetrack, and you can see in the back row of this photo. And sometimes you'll see this in antique stores or even just shops around Athens, this 98 Ford that's got a Georgia G on the front. It was driven in the 2001 Busch Series race at Atlanta, the Aaron's 312. Didn't go great for Elton Sawyer. Got in a wreck, finished 35th. But a really cool scheme, and one that, again, I think you see it pop up every once in a while around Athens. Pulling up a photo of Buckshot Jones, a guy that from Monticello, Georgia, a guy that was in the Busch Series for a while, had his most success in the Busch Series. He had earned a business degree from Georgia, decided to get into racing, and did so first with his own team in that AAA series. Wins races at Milwaukee, New Hampshire. Really, as someone who was following NASCAR at that time, I was a kid. I started watching racing really intently when I was 6, 7 years old. Buckshot got a chance to drive in the Cup Series, which is, the equivalent of MLB in baseball, the top level compared to, like I said, Busch Series, Xfinity Series, that AAA. Drove for Petty Enterprises. You see the Georgia Pacific Dodge on the screen here. Didn't have a great run in Cup, but was a guy that hung around for a while and was someone that, I know especially at Atlanta Motor Speedway, very popular guy, a guy that a lot of folks were rooting for. Now, this is something that I had learned in the past and just totally forgotten about this, that a group of 3 Georgia grads, Reed Morton Jr., Nelson Bowers, and Thomas Beard, they all owned a team that was called MB2 Motorsports. At one point, it was MBV Motorsports in the Cup Series. You can see some of the paint schemes if you are watching the video. The number 10 car Johnny Benson drove in the early 2000s. He won a race at Rockingham. There's a photo here a little bit later on with this team of Joe Nemechek when Joe won at Kansas. And I threw on the Ken Schrader 36 M&M's car. Not a lot of success in that car, but to me, one of the best paint schemes of the 2000s with the M&M's on that 36 Pontiac. A classic, a team that, really in those early 2000s weren't really competing for championships, but like I mentioned with Benson and Nemechek, won a few races along the way, hung around in that Cup Series at a time when it was super competitive and definitely very difficult to keep up. Now, when you look to the Cup Series today, you see, not even just the Cup Series, but also in Xfinity, a few drivers hanging around with ties to Georgia, both the state and the university. And the one that people flock to is the guy who I've talked about a few times already, Chase Elliott, a guy that won the championship in 2020, the most popular driver in the Cup Series. Again, the son of Bill Elliott, who was named most popular driver a number of times, I think over a dozen in a row. But I want to go back to this clip. When Chase was coming up, when he was still sort of getting settled in the Cup Series, that top series, it just seemed like he could never break through, get that first win. It took so many opportunities. It took so many close calls, a couple run-ins with some of the other drivers. And he finally does it at Watkins Glen. He wins his first race at a road course, holds off a veteran and Martin Truex Jr. to get the win. And what was really interesting and caught a lot of Georgia fans' attention after the fact was that Chase Elliott talked about Kirby Smart and shared some of the advice and just a message he had heard from Kirby in the past. And it stuck with him on what at the time, was the biggest moment of his career.
This morning I woke up and I watched the video. Kirby Smart had a speech about having pressure is a privilege, and I had that on repeat this morning in the bus, just thinking about it. Thought we had a chance today, and wanted to make sure that if we were in a position to try to capitalize, and we did.
Chase is going to be one of the guys to watch at Daytona on Sunday. He's looked at as a perennial championship contender. He was in the mix in the 2024 season. I expect he will be again this year. Now, another up-and-comer with ties to Georgia, Austin Hill, no relation, from the Douglasville area in Georgia, a guy that's still in that AAA level, the Xfinity Series, but has made a few spot starts along the way for Richard Childress Racing. If you recognize that name, Richard Childress, that's who Dale Earnhardt Sr. drove for the majority of his career. But Austin is a big Georgia Bulldogs fan, and he showed that this clip I'm going to play was before the 2024 season. So that's Georgia coming off of that SEC title game loss to Alabama. He talked to Fox's Bob Pockris about his fandom and rocking some Georgia shoes whenever he's in the cockpit.
The Georgia shoes, are those new?
Yeah, I had them last season. I've always been born and raised in Georgia, grew up in Douglasville area, and so I ran all season last year with these on, and so I figured do it again.
So are you bitter at the committee?
I mean, it is what it is. Oh well, I guess there's always next year.
Austin is a guy that I think kind of drives like Dale Earnhardt Sr. He sort of has that intimidating factor. He's had some run-ins in that Xfinity Series, and I would encourage folks, on Saturdays to watch that Xfinity Series because it's been really entertaining. That Cup Series on Sunday, that's the top drivers. Those are the names you're really going to know if you kind of follow the sport at all. But Austin Hill keeps it interesting on Saturdays. I would encourage folks to watch him there. Now, the brunt of this conversation today is going to be more so about pit crews. And there's a couple guys I want to highlight before we get into the interview. And we're going to start with Darius Dewberry, a guy that was a Georgia linebacker in the mid-2000s and then spent quite a bit of time over at Hendrick Motorsports, which is the team that Chase Elliott drives for. Other drivers like William Byron, Alex Bowman, Kyle Larson. If you recognize Hendrick, that's where Jeff Gordon drove for the majority of his career as well. And, it was a situation too with Darius Dewberry where he gets done playing football at Georgia and doesn't really know what he wants to do next. And, the folks at Georgia pointed him toward NASCAR, where he became an assistant strength and conditioning coach at Hendrick. You can see the photo on the screen, a couple of photos both from his playing career and his time at Hendrick. And it carries over into the conversation we're about to have with Nate McBride. Nate's a guy that played for some of those early Kirby Smart teams there at Georgia, gets out, done playing football, trying to decide what's next. And Nate will get into this in our conversation, but gets an opportunity in NASCAR and tries it and gets hooked. And if you're watching this, you can see a photo of him from his time at Georgia and then his time as a jackman on the 11 Denny Hamlin car. That was sort of a spot appearance for him, as he will explain in our conversation. He's also pitted for Kyle Busch in the Truck Series. He's also worked with Eric Jones. That's where he's been the last few years. And, after you listen to this, if you want to keep up with Nate on Sunday at the Daytona 500, the rest of the season, he's going to be on the number 4 car. He is the jackman for Noah Gragson. A lot of excitement about Noah, a young up-and-coming driver who is coming over from Stewart Haas Racing to Front Row Motorsports. So if you want to keep up with Nate this season, he'll be jacking the car on the number 4. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and dive into our conversation with Nate McBride. All right, everybody, sitting down with a blast from the past from Georgia football, Nate McBride, a former linebacker for the Bulldogs, now in NASCAR as a jackman with Joe Gibbs Racing. You'll see him pitting the number 4 car for Noah Gragson when we get to the Daytona 500. Nate, first, thanks for coming on here. Excited to catch up with you. I'll just ask you, how's it going as we're recording this? We're still a few weeks away from that Daytona 500. What's the last few weeks been like for you as you get ready for another NASCAR season?
It's been good. All December, we pretty much, if you wanted to show up, it was OTAs. We showed up, got better, did some practice, got in the weight room a little bit. But as soon as January, let's say 6th started, we were pretty much full swing. We got our physicals out the way and whatnot. But now we're practicing Monday through Thursday in the weight room, getting ready, getting our choreography down for Daytona.
So I want to start, Nate, by looking back at your time at Georgia. I want to go even a little bit before that. You coming up in Vidalia, you getting ready and being a high school standout there. Were you a Georgia fan at all growing up? Did you have any connections to Georgia before you wound up playing for the Bulldogs?
I think everybody around me was a Georgia fan. I just love ball. I gotta say, Oregon was my team growing up. I think it was because of the flashiness, the jerseys, whatever. But I always loved the Dogs as a home state, so you got to root for them. But honestly, growing up, no.
So what was recruiting like for you, and then what led you to stay home and go to Georgia?
It was a crazy process. You're getting 50 letters in the mail every day from different schools. Once one team offers you, I've always told people this, everybody else comes after. It's a trickle effect. But it was good all in all, getting to see the coaches come to the school. And I always thought that was cool. I tried to keep my head small. But with Georgia, just, you have outside influence. And my dad always told me, and, my family, whatnot, they always told me that, it's your decision. You don't have to think about what everybody else says. But at the end of the day, Georgia was it was home. I didn't want to leave the state. I wanted my family to come and see me play. If I'd went to Oregon or something like that, maybe once a year. But just with the coaches and Kirby being there, I met Kirby when he was still at Bama. But he's just a homegrown man, loves the dogs, and it's that type of um, just the camaraderie around it. It was just so much fun to be around, and me not even being there yet, I you know I knew that was a place to go. It seemed like a family.
You mentioned Kirby, and when you're getting to Georgia, that's sort of the start of his time at Georgia. The 2016 season doesn't go as everybody had hoped, but there's still hope for the alum coming back to Georgia, building it up. What was it like those early years with Coach Smarty? Any stories come to mind playing for him?
Oh, well, he was very intense, and everybody that you talk to, it doesn't matter. As long as you play for Kirby, he's going to have that microphone in his hand, and he's going to be yelling through the speakers. It don't matter if we're inside, outside, and he will drill you a new one every day, and that's all right because you needed that. You needed the toughness, you needed the adversity of the sport because you want to make practice harder than the game, and he did very well at that. But he always kept it family first. It was always about us, and that's what made us good. And the Sick'em 17 boys, man, I remember coming up, and you got Richard and Jake in my recruitment video or my commitment video, Malik, and it was cool. We were a brotherhood before we even got there.
I want to ask you about another coach in Glenn Schumann, a guy that has made a name for himself, as one of the top linebackers coaches in the country, one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. The time you're getting there, he's still a young guy, a guy that's still kind of proving himself. What do you remember about playing for Coach Schumann and what he taught you and what it was like being around him?
Man, he was different, that's for sure. He was a guru. I've never seen somebody know the game in and out, front and back more than he did. Being up under Kirby for so long, he learned a lot, and you could tell sometimes he'd get on a ramble and he would go and go, and we'd be talking about a coverage in cover four, and we're supposed to be talking about cover three. And then he'd start talking about movies. I can't remember the movie he used to quote all the time, but man, he would just keep going. And we'd be the last ones. You talk to any linebacker, we'd be the last ones at camp in the meeting rooms. Everybody knew that Schumann was going to hold us because he wanted us to learn.
I want to ask you about as a freshman, you get in the Rose Bowl on special teams and able to make a play. Just what do you remember about the experience of being in that game? And now I think even with years removed from it, I think a lot of Georgia fans look back fondly on that game. What was that experience like being in that Rose Bowl?
I mean, just the history behind it. You've heard about the Rose Bowl growing up, just if you know ball. But being there and getting to do all the festivities during the week, and it leads up to the big game, and they get out early on us. Funny story, since I've been in Charlotte, when Baker was here in Charlotte, I was at I guess you could call it a bar. It was a bar, but I saw him there, and I walked up to him and I said, "You're Baker, right?" And I was just stupid, but he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, we beat y'all 2017. I know you remember it." And he said, "I still hate y'all." He said, "I love Nick Chubb, but I hate y'all." So it was pretty cool.
That's awesome. You look at the time you were at Georgia. I mean, that was really when Kirby Smart, when the program really made that resurgence. Your senior class, 44 wins, an SEC title, won a Rose Bowl, won a Sugar Bowl, won a Peach Bowl. When you look back at your time at Georgia, what are your personal highlights? What are your favorite memories of being a Bulldog there?
I mean, I'd have to say the locker room, and everybody says the locker room. You can talk about the rings, you can talk about the games and how amazing they were, but being in the locker room, getting to see all walks of life come together, and you don't see color, you don't see backgrounds. It's just who that person is with you at that time when you're sweating your butt off and you're about to die at practice, and they're just like, "Come on, man, you got to keep going, keep going." It was always the locker room for me, and I think probably most everybody.
What do you feel like you learned from your time there at Georgia that you think about all these guys who play. Some guys are going to get to go to the NFL. A lot of guys are not. They're going to have to move on and do something else. You look at the career path that you've chosen, there's still a lot of competition in it. There's still that physical nature. What do you feel like you learned from being a player at Georgia that has translated to what you're doing now, being a jackman in NASCAR?
I'd say perseverance. Um, the moment's never too big. We were in front of 95,000 fans pretty much every Saturday. Um, it's not much different from 30 to 40 race cars going around you, which is a lot louder when it's an enclosed space. But perseverance, discipline, being able to be coachable, because that's the biggest thing in NASCAR. Nobody knows how to do it when they come in. So being able to get coached up from even the old heads, um, and then the teamwork, the team aspect, putting your guys first. It's always when you put your guys first and you give them what they need, and in return you get back what you need. It's always it always sets you up for success.
What's it been like to follow the team since you graduated? I mean, to see the success. Do you get a chance to go back much? And if not, just what's it like following the team and what they've been able to accomplish?
Well, everybody in Charlotte knows that I'm a dog. If you ain't heard me bark, you've heard me talk about them. I love it, and I think this class might have been the last class from some of the guys I knew. So it's going to be a little different, but I'm gonna be a dog till I die, which is, that's first and foremost. But it's been fun. I've been back. I didn't go last year. I tried to, but it just didn't work out. But I went the year before when we played Ole Miss, and Ladd was just torching everybody out there. I got to take one of my fellow teammates as well. The 2 years before that, I went as well. So I'm gonna try to get back this year. I hope I can, but I mean, our season's so long, so it's just hard to find time.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys do it with as long as the NASCAR season is. And I wanted to kind of jump into that piece of it, Nate, and start with, were you a NASCAR fan before you ever got involved? Did you have any kind of connection to NASCAR before you wound up following that career path?
No, not at all. I just thought it was, for a certain type of crowd, and I thought all they did was go left. It don't look like they're going fast on TV. It really don't. But going to a race and being in it and seeing all the behind the scenes stuff to get the cars ready, to get us ready, and even the sponsors, it just all of them flooding in, whether it's at practice or at the track. You have to be on your best behavior, because you're putting Joe Gibbs, you're putting them out there. So he always tells us to represent as well and don't make a fool of us, which is what Kirby told us. So that transitioned to as well. But it's wild, man. It's so cool, but I love it now.
So tell me how you got into it. I kind of come into this interview thinking, oh, he must have followed it when he was younger. But so how did you wind up, following once you're done with football and got involved in NASCAR?
So Lee Futch, she works in the academic building at Georgia. I remember I had no idea what I was going to do. I thought I wanted to go into sales. I could talk to people. I'm all right with talking to people. But she came up to me, and there's a dude named Kevin Allman. I think he used to be the AD. I could be wrong, but at Bama, and he's now a recruiter for NASCAR. So she called me up and was like, "Listen, I think you'd be perfect for the job. Why don't you just look at it, see? I got a little brochure, whatever." The money looked good, of course, but just still having that competitive nature of being with a team. At first I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it. I moved to near Atlanta with my brother because he was coaching there at the time. And I was sitting on my butt, honestly, and I had no path, no direction. I was about to start a job with cold calling. And I said, that ain't me. I said, I need to be on my feet. I need to be moving around, chop it up with the guys. So I took a leap of faith, and by the Lord's grace, I got to Charlotte, tried out. They called me back, and they sent me to P3, which is in Atlanta. It's like a performance center the Hawks use them. And did the little assessment there. And then after that, they were like, can you start in November? I think it was 8th. And I was like, yeah. Moved to Charlotte, didn't know a single soul. Shout out to Will Cooper. He helped me along the way. He played ball at Bama. But man, it's changed my life, and I thank the Lord every day for it.
I want to ask you, you mentioned that there was someone else who had played, and I thought it was fascinating the way the broadcast did this past season. They did a very good job of highlighting the pit crews, and you saw a lot of guys who would introduce themselves and say, "Hey, I played football wherever," you know. Why is it you think that there are so many former football players that they wind up coming to NASCAR? They wind up working on these pit crews?
I mean, number one, athleticism. You can't find athleticism like you can find in football. And I'm not hating on my boys that play baseball, whatever, because I have a couple of teammates that play baseball, even ran track. But it's football it's the ultimate team sport. You have to have chemistry because if one player messes up, the A gap's wide open. If the linebacker fills the B gap when he shouldn't, that's a touchdown. You have to be able to talk with your guys and know what's going on. And then also, we play in front of thousands of fans. So we've been there. The pressure's not too big. And I did like how they did that this year. They should have done us, but maybe this year they'll do us.
So you mentioned earlier kind of learning the ropes. I mean, for people, I'm sure there are going to be plenty of people who listen to this that say, "Oh, Nate McBride, I remember him playing at Georgia," but have no connection with NASCAR, don't watch it regularly, and don't understand, what goes into a pit stop. Tell me what the learning curve was like for you early on, just learning what it takes and the choreography and learning how to do it and how to do it right.
Well, I'll say for my, I guess you'd call it a tryout. They pretty much, the normal, it's like an L drill. I don't know if you heard of an L drill. I'm sure you have. But instead of going under the cone, we go around like it's the nose of the car. But after we did all that, they actually put me on the car and I jacked it. And it was weird. So, I mean, nobody knows what's going on. But, um, I mean, it's just repetition. That's how you get good at this sport. You have to be repetitive on your movements. You can't start out fast because then you'll screw up. You have to start slow. You have to be able to, get the basics down before you can move forward. And they give you plenty of time. The hardest part, at least for me, was the transition from the pit practice to the track because it's different. You got other cars coming in at the same time as yours. And I remember my first rep, I jumped off the wall early, got a penalty. Kyle Busch was in the lead, sent him to the back. This was the truck race. I ended up winning the Coke 600 that Sunday, but we won't talk about that. I'm kidding. But it's a big learning curve, and being able to be coachable is the biggest thing. You got to listen to your coaches. You have to listen to the guys that's been there, that's done it, because they all want to help, which is very nice. At least it gives. It's a big family, and everybody wants everybody to do well. So.
I want to let you talk about, the different stops you made since you came to NASCAR, the teams you pitted for, where you've been these last few years, just sort of what your NASCAR career has looked like since you got into it.
Yeah, so I got in November of 21, um, practiced for about 6 months, and I can't remember when the Coke 600 was. It's mid to early summer. Um, that was my first cup race. Like I said, I did the truck race. Trucks are so much more difficult, just the way that it's set up, than a cup car. But I screwed up the truck race, pretty much lost Kyle the race. So I was pretty much down on myself. Um, that was that Friday. Then that Sunday comes a Coke 600. Coke 600 is the longest race of the year. The reason I got the shot was if you lose a tire on pit road or on the track, the jackman and whatever changer was on that tire, they're suspended for, now it's 2 weeks, it was 4 weeks. So that's how I got my shot. We get there, it was the longest race in NASCAR history. It was the most stops. I don't know if it was NASCAR history, but it was pretty close. um Ended up winning the race. That was awesome. Got a ring for it. But after that, did those 4 races. Then I got back to work, practice, whatever, pretty much the backup man. And then towards the end of that year, I got on Bubba Wallace's car for a couple races. Then Ty stepped in for Kurt Busch when Kurt got a concussion, and I think it was 22. So finished out the year with Ty Gibbs. And then 23, I was with Eric Jones the 43 the whole season. And then 24, I was with Michael McDowell last year. And now I'm with Noah. So it's been a process.
I want to ask you when it comes to kind of bouncing around, serving and working with these different teams, the time it takes to be on the same page with the other people on the crew. I mean, to sort of get that connection. I'm sure that that's probably what a lot of this offseason has been like for you getting ready for this year with Noah. How important is that everybody kind of being on the same page and kind of going back to the word I used earlier, the choreography that goes into any given
Mhm.
bit stop?
Yeah, it takes time. Now, luckily for myself and my team, we've been together for since Eric Jones, so 2 years. We've had a couple people, get taken off, moved up, whatever. But now this past year and then this year, it's pretty much the same team. We have a new carrier, but I mean, we all have so much chemistry with him already. But that's all it is with a pit stop. I mean, from the changer moving his knee just a little bit so I can have a little more room to hang the tire. It makes it faster when he comes back. When I don't have to worry about the right rear being slow because our rear changer is able to zip it on, you just get that feel for it. You can almost it's down to the being able to hear things. If I hear the gun spooling up because he couldn't get the nut tight, I'm like, okay, I can't drop it yet, or it's going to be a long stop because I got to pick it back up. We got to put the nut on. Then we got to go around. It's a lot of small things that could go wrong, especially with a one lug. So you just have to be on your P's and Q's, and the chemistry it's the biggest part.
And I want to let you kind of to talk up your job, but also all the jackmen in NASCAR. I mean, that for people who are listening to this who do not follow NASCAR closely, the pit stop isn't really possible if you're changing tires without the jackman. You guys are the ones lifting the car, allowing them to change the tires. Just how crucial that role is, Nate, for a pit stop. What the jackman has to do anytime there's going to be a tire change.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said it. The jack man is either if you're a defensive minded guy like I am, you're the middle linebacker. But if you're an offensive minded guy, you're the quarterback. You're what makes the play go. You tell everybody what to do. No, I don't. They know what to do. It's the choreography. But nothing can go. Now, you could say, well, the car can't go if it doesn't have gas. The car can't go if it doesn't have a tire. So everybody's crucial in the pit stop, but you can't get the tire off to put a new one on if you ain't got the jackman. So it's big up to all the jackmen out there. It's tough because we have to worry about everybody else. Everybody else has their one job. We have to make sure the front rear changer are good, make sure we got enough gas in the car for, let's say, a Daytona when we don't have to do as fast as a stop because we have to fill the car up because they run for so long because the tire wear is not, detrimental or whatever. But yeah, the jackman, we got to worry about everybody.
You mentioned the Coke 600 win earlier. What are the other moments or highlights for you in your time in NASCAR? What are the moments that pop up and you're like, man, that was something special?
Um, Pretty much every Bristol race. I love Bristol. It's that stadium feel. It just rises up and it keeps going and keeps going. It feels like you're in a stadium, and I think it holds 100 plus. But I would say last year we hit a couple of PRs on the track. We hit, I think, 2.85s back to back. I think that was our fastest. We'll hopefully shoot for you could say better, which would be a lower time. But definitely those. And again, the locker room, just being able to talk with the guys and, you know, get their background. I'd say another thing is what we started doing last year. We have a team meeting every Tuesday, 7 a.m. To end the team meeting, we'd always bring up a guy, one of the pit crew guys, and they tell us their story, their background. And, it's just that real home feeling of, okay, now I know where he's from, what he struggled with, and how he was raised up, pretty much how he got here. It's been nice. It's been more of a family setting, which that's why I love Gibbs so much.
And it sounds a lot with what Kirby and those guys at Georgia have done in recent years of trying to get everybody to sort of know each other's story. I mean, I think that's got to be huge, whether you're going out there and getting ready for a big game or like you guys are doing, waiting on one pit stop where you got to hit it just perfect to get that guy out there and get him back on the track.
Oh, for sure. it makes you want to ride for your brothers more when you know about them, when you know what they've been through. I mean, I'm not going to go to war with somebody I don't know unless I'm called to. But it's a lot easier when you get to know the person around you. You get to know what makes them tick, what they might not like, so you can avoid that to get the best out of them. It takes a lot. And when you know somebody, it makes you want to work even harder for them.
Yeah, those skull sessions that Kirby and those guys do a big part of the story these last few years with Georgia. Nate, I wanted to let you talk about what you guys are getting ready for this season and starting with Daytona. I mean, what is pitting the Daytona 500 like for a crewman? I mean, there's, anyone who watches that race, it's a very nerve-wracking race when they're out there on the track. I can only imagine what it's like once they come in the pits. What is that experience of the 500 like for a crewman?
It's cool. I mean, you ask some of the old heads, they're just like, well, it's another race. They've done it millions of times. But for any newcomers and people that just love the sport, the atmosphere. We get there 4 hours early, set up the pit box, make sure everything's good to go. But then we're chilling in the hauler, eating some food, whatever. Talking with the guys, and then you get to see all the fans come in and sometimes I'll bring some family members or, one of my boys will bring some family members. We get to talk with them. But once we get on, we go out the pit road an hour before the race starts and we, just finalize everything, make sure everything's good for the race. But seeing all the people on pit road and, behind the haulers walking, they want to come up and take pictures with you. It's the coolest thing, and it's all a show. That's what it is. It reminds me of the WWE, but it's not fixed. But for us, pit crew, it's not as big of a challenge for us because the pit stops don't have to be fast. We're waiting on fuel. We only do probably 3 pit stops, 4 tires, whatever, maybe even just right sides. And it's anybody's game at Daytona or Talladega. It's anybody's game. Harrison Burton, it was the cutoff race right before the playoffs started. And he ended up winning the race because so many people wreck out. There's always that big wreck. It's just, I love it when they don't take the foot off the gas, though. And those are the races that they don't take their foot off the gas. They're just going. It's really cool to see.
What's your excitement like to be pitting with this front row team? Noah Gragson coming over, a young driver, a guy that people in the sport are, still very excited about. What's your excitement like to be pitting with this crew this year?
Very excited with my boys again from the previous 2 years, so that's nice. But we actually went up the front row last week, tore down the pit box, make sure we knew what we were doing because it's a different pit box from last year. But Noah was right in the mix, helping us out. He's very hands-on, which I appreciate. He's got that. He's a young Thundercat, as the old heads would say. He'll get after it, which I like. I always talk about just meeting somebody in the A gap, wanting to hit them. It's just that fire in you that you have to be at the top. And I think Noah, he's young, but he'll get there because he has that fire. He wants to win. He wants to help out, even behind the scenes. It's cool. And then the behind the wall crew, like the engineers, whatnot, they're all great guys. It seems like the car chief from the 43 2 years ago is actually our car chief now, Joey, and he's just I don't know. He's a good old boy. That's it. And so it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun seeing what we can do.
You mentioned this earlier when you were talking about pitting at Bristol, but I mean, how does it compare waiting on a pit stop in Bristol to, a kickoff in Sanford Stadium and you're getting ready to go down and make a play on special teams? Just what is the energy similar? I mean, what's it like comparing those two?
It's very similar. You're just ready to go. My dad would always tell me, you're gonna be nervous until you get that first hit out the way. And then after that, you got to play ball. So I'd say the first kickoff compared to the first pit stop, it's that adrenaline rush, what's going to happen. Because at Bristol, the track's so small, you could blow a tire, you can run into the wall and they're already on you. You got to be ready. So we're always ready. We're always locked in. And, but I tell you, there ain't nothing like running down on kickoff on a Saturday, especially at 7:30 when them lights are on. Man, that was the best feeling ever.
Nate, the last question I got for you because you're somebody who didn't, grow up watching NASCAR, didn't have that connection. You talked about getting into it. I know there are going to be people who listen to this who don't have that NASCAR connection. What would you tell them about the experience of saying, the thing I always do, Nate, because I'm someone who grew up watching NASCAR, I always
Mhm.
tell people go to a race. And when
Mhm.
I've taken people who've never gone, it's like they're hooked.
Mhm.
What would you tell people who aren't NASCAR fans about the experience and what they get to see if they go to a race?
Um, well, number one, and it's every NASCAR fan knows this, it's bring your own beer. You ain't got to pay for it. That might draw some people, that might not. That's on you. Um, but just like you said, you have to go. You can't watch it on TV because you won't get the full effect. You stand by that fence when them cars are going 180, 200 right there at you, you'll feel it. And then you'll get the adrenaline rush. You're sitting in the stands, or even for us, you feel it in your heart, the rumble of all the cars. You feel it in your heart. I feel like I'm quoting Talladega right now, or what's it called? The
Talladega
Will Ferrell
Nights.
movie. Yeah, Talladega Nights. Um, but you have to go. It's 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 one of those experiences that you'll it's an adrenaline rush. You'll always want it again. You'll always try to find it again. You'll keep going to races because it's just so different. It's such a niche sport, but when you get into it, it's hard to get out of it just because it's crazy. Just everything from the pageantry to the racing to the wrecks to watching the pit stops. It all has to come together, and it does very well.
I did want to throw one more at you, Nate, because you mentioned Joe Gibbs earlier. I don't know how much you've gotten to be around him, but if you do, what is it like being a member of Joe Gibbs Racing? And if you have any stories of Joe Gibbs, feel free to share them.
It's legendary. And that's within itself. He's NASCAR Hall of Fame, NFL Hall of Fame. I mean, you think that he's a. I don't even want to say that because it wouldn't do him justice. But um, he's so down to earth. He loves the Lord more than anybody I've seen, um, and he's based his entire company operation around it. And we have Bible studies Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and we have small groups, and it, he's a family man. That's all he is a family man. And but with him having all those accolades, you think, oh, we never see him, whatever. He's always around. He's always in our meetings. He's always helping other people out. He'll come in our team meetings at 7 a.m. and start talking about Sean Taylor. It's just the craziest thing. And just his perspective on everything it's so cool because he's been there. He's been to the top. He's won at the top. Um, but I'd say the biggest thing for me is his faith and how he carries it and how he's implemented that into the company and how many people he's reached through faith. It's truly something that I would have never dreamed of because it's just so amazing.
I mean, truly a legend in two different sports, motorsports and football.
Oh
Nate,
yeah,
I really appreciate the time. I did want to give you opportunity. Anything you want to shout out? Anything you want to say before we wrap this up?
of course. Well, thank you, number one, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I always love talking about the dogs, and I hope it never dies. I hope I can talk about it to the day I die. But of course, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. He's blessed me beyond belief, and He will renew your strength when you feel like you're at your lowest. It's amazing to follow a God and to love a God who loves you back. Um, Second thing, shout out to my four boys. We got the 4 for 4 deal. Um, that's my family, all the guys at Gibbs, of course, my parents, my brother, my now sister and their baby, my beautiful girlfriend, Kinsey. Um, Shout out to the guys, man. That's what they always say. Shout out to the guys. But yeah, I'm so blessed and I'm so happy to be where I'm at. I'm right where God wants me to be. So I'm blessed.
Well, I know, Nate, a lot of Georgia fans are rooting for you and hoping that a whole lot of them will be watching you guys at Daytona 500 and see if y'all can put that 4 car in victory lane.
And shout out to the dogs. Go dogs. Arr! I'm sorry.
Great conversation with Nate. Really appreciated him taking the time during the off season to talk about his career, his journey, getting ready to pit that 4-car. Just as a quick explanation, I wanted to bring this up before the conversation, but Nate works for Joe Gibbs Racing, and Joe Gibbs, JGR, they basically contract out pit crew members. So he is going to pit for Front Row Motorsports at number 4 Ford, driven by Noah Gragson. And the reason Joe Gibbs does that, one, they can make money working with these smaller teams who don't have the resources to put together pit crews. But two, they keep guys like Nate McBride within their team, within their organization to, if there's a point where one of Joe Gibbs Racing's actual cars, the Denny Hamlin car in the 11, Christopher Bell in the 20, Chase Briscoe in the 19, if they need one of these crew members, they will pull them over. And this kind of lets Nate continue to get experience working in the Cup Series, but also keeps him sort of in that Joe Gibbs Racing stable. And we may see one day he's pitting one of those JGR cars, and I think he's got a very bright future ahead. Well, I appreciate y'all hanging on and hanging out and watching and listening to this episode. It was one I'd been wanting to do. I'd actually tried to get Nate McBride during one of the summers, just didn't get the timing to work out. But hope that y'all learned something from this. I hope those of you who are NASCAR fans enjoyed it. And I hope that if you don't watch racing, maybe you'll keep an eye out for that race on Sunday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. You'll see that 4 Ford. Keep an eye out when they're pitting. You'll see Nate McBride going around that car with the jack, lifting the car up and trying to keep Noah Gragson in the mix. I do think Noah's got a chance. These super speedway races like Daytona, like Atlanta now, Talladega, it's kind of anyone's ball game. So I think that 4-car will be toward the front, and Nate McBride and his crew are going to do what they can to put the car in victory lane. That'd be Noah Gregson's first win, and that would be a big one to start the 2025 season. Well, we will wrap up this episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. Thanks to everyone who watched this live, everyone who's watching and listening to it after the fact. Be sure to go to dogs247.com and subscribe if you haven't already. Go to our YouTube, go to our TikTok. Lots of good content. We got less than a month until spring practice starts for Georgia. Continuing to follow Georgia men's basketball, Georgia baseball getting started this weekend. Very busy time of year, but we love this busy time of year. It keeps us going. It keeps us putting out content, writing stories, and doing podcasts like this one. So we'll wrap it up right there. Until next time, take care, everybody.